This series of videos is to give you an overview and hopefully some ideas, strategies on how to organize your process towards becoming a behavior analyst. There's a tremendous amount of information to learn. I want to focus on some of the important things, stress the importance particularly of beginning as a professional and ethical behavior analyst. In the top left, you'll see the Professional Ethical Compliance Code Behavior Analysis. I think the most important thing we can do in the field is be professionals, be ethical. And we have a code to guide us through that from the BACB. Under that, you'll see two resources that I strongly recommend is the Ethics Books for Behavior Analysts, 3rd edition from John Bailey and Mary Birch. And next to that is the 25 Essential Skills for the Professional Behavior Analyst. Those are not required books in this course, although you will have the Ethics book come up later if you're taking the 6-course sequence. Below that is the 4th edition task list, the BACB 4th edition task list. I was required to get a license from the board to be able to post this logos online, so this is part of being ethical and doing the right thing. And what I want to do is quickly talk about ethical issues, and my main point behind these videos is everything I have up here I'm going to just touch on briefly with the idea of stressing you need to learn this stuff thoroughly. You need to read the full task list, read the full compliance code, and you need to study that 4th edition task list, learn the basic structure of it. I'll show you in a few minutes why that's important, and tie everything to applied behavior analysis to be a practitioner in the field. With regard to ethical issues, there was an article called Client Right to Effective Treatment. They make 6 main points in there. One of the things you need to do in the process is read the entire article and learn those right to effective treatments. Client has the right to refuse treatment. There's also an important concept called informed consent. It has 3 bullet points to it about capacity, information, and voluntariness. It's crucial that you as a professional know all of these parameters of ethics and informed consent. And under that I have a number of bullets of areas that I've learned to focus on. These are just a drop in the bucket of all the things to look at. Things like focusing on solving problems, health and safety priorities, medical physical considerations, collaboration on clear behavioral goals, level of independent skills, client-based preferences, decisions that favor the client, social validity of the procedures and the treatment, using the least intrusive procedures when possible, and coming up with an intact support system for the long-term benefit of the client. Those are just a kickoff about being professional ethical. Learning behavior analysis is about learning the science of behavior. That requires that you brush up on your science and come at this model as a very much science-driven study of a natural science of behavior. Science, very quickly, as you remember from your Psych 101 class, was basically science is about description, prediction, and control, and then doing experimental demonstrations to show that what you've described, what you predicted will happen, can then be controlled by manipulating specific variables, independent variables, and measuring those effects on dependent variables. And behavior analysis were very based in science, so it's crucial that you brush up on the science. I've helped countless people prepare for and pass the board exam, and when I force them to go back to the basics and really learn the science and look at this as a natural science, just like physics, chemistry, biology, behavior, these all occur naturally as a natural science. So we need to learn to know, we know that physics, chemistry, and biology all affect our behavior, so we need to use the science approach, learn it, understand what makes behavior so scientific. Looking at the natural behavior, we can now understand so much more about behavior than we did just a few decades ago. To do that, you've got to use some basic philosophical foundations, understand the premises of and the reasoning about science and behavior. To that extent, the far right column lists the first 9 foundational knowledge items of the 4th edition task list. I'm going to run those very briefly. I think the most important, and apparently the board does too at the top, is the lawfulness of behavior. And the next video will address and show you some examples of the lawful relations of behavior and the environment. The second one is selectionism. And one of the issues you're going to find in behavior analysis, we're looking at where and how behavior becomes selected. And the 3 main inputs are from our species, the phylogenetic factors, the inheritance of our genes from our ancestors, the ontogenic factors, that's your own genes from your parents, as well as the environment you grew up in. And the third factor is indeed the culture, the environment you grew up in. Your basic genetics and your environment are those determiners. Those are the things that select what's going to happen with your behavior. Below that, you'll see a number of terms. Anytime you see an ism, basically an ism is a philosophy, just like science is a philosophy that believes if we can learn how things work, we can make things better. So determinism is a basic factor, a basic premise in science that we think things are caused by something. It's a cause-effect world. So we're going to be looking for the causes of behavior in the environment. Empiricism, a philosophy that in order to determine things are scientific and measurable, we have to be able to detect those changes. That makes them empirical. So we're going to use empirical measures about behavior. Parsimony, sometimes referred to as Occam's razor, is the scientific premise that you want to use the most simple explanation to explain the most factors possible. The simpler the explanation, the more often that turns out to be the guiding principle in understanding how and why things happen. Pragmatism requires that belief that we must be pragmatic, and typically that comes down to being practical. If we're going to talk about science and explain, demonstrate, and control, it needs to show a cause-effect. It needs to be measurable. It should be the simplest explanation. It needs to be practical. It needs to make sense. It needs to be understandable, explainable. Next set of premises is environmental versus mentalistic. This is a huge departure from what most of us were taught growing up in our university courses, that in behavior analysis we look at behavior as a function of the environment, versus a mentalistic approach which suggests that behavior is controlled by the mind. In psychology, you probably learned about dualism, which suggests that what the mind does and how the mind works, it tells the behavior of the body what to do. We don't use the dualism model in behavior analysis. We skip the mentalistic. We don't use the concept of mind because it's not a physical mind. It's actually a more metaphysical concept. So the challenge here is to learn all that we've learned and known about behavior and translate that into a behavioral science set of terms. And rather than attribute the cause of behavior to an internal mechanism that's a metaphysical concept, rather look at how interactions with the environment, those behaviors indeed are the locus of control. This is a very important concept to understand. The idea here being that things like thinking and reasoning and understanding are behaviors. And typically those are considered mentalistic processes or cognitive processes, which is a fine way to label them. But we want to look at it as things like thinking is actually a behavior. Behavior is something that you do, and thinking is something that we do. So when you're thinking, we're going to look at it as something that you are doing is thinking about things that you have encountered in your environment, your experiences, what you've read, what you've seen, what you've heard, as opposed to that your mind is thinking and then your mind is telling you what to do about it. So you're going to want to be able to look at things and understand how to translate from the language we've been grown up with to basically how do we explain it as actual behavior. This helps us put the locus of control in the environment. Again, a very important premise. Behaviorism, the philosophy that if we could learn and understand about behavior and how it works, just like if we learn about science, we should be able to make things better. So it's a philosophy saying we can improve things if we understand how they work. Under that you have radical and methodological behaviorism. Radical behaviorism basically says it's all behavior, whether it's private behavior that's inside your skin, it's the way you think, it's what's happening in your body, or if it's methodological, which says we're only going to be able to measure the things that are publicly available. The last four concepts sum up the field of behavior analysis. We have conceptual analysis of behavior, and these videos will be very much about discussing, explaining, and understanding the concepts in this field, behavior analysis. Many of these same concepts are explained in other fields with slightly different language. Any model, any theory, any explanation needs to have a consistency, integrity within its own model. So we'll talk about behavior analysis conceptually. Also, experimental analysis of behavior was the foundation for applied behavior analysis. Without experimental analysis of behavior, running countless research experiments in laboratories using scientific models, we've extracted, we've learned, we've discovered the principles of behavior. Then we use those for applied behavior analysis to try to solve socially significant problems. The last item listed is behavioral service delivery. Behavioral service delivery is where we talk about the concepts, we use the principles we've extracted and discovered from experimental analysis, we apply procedures, environmentally induced procedures to try to help clients improve their behavior. That's behavioral service delivery. Next I want to go to lawfulness of behavior. I'm going to make a second video. I'll be right back.